Folks, I am one proud Bavarian, and today I would like to take a journey into what we know of the Victoria 3 economy system. In this video, I will be summarizing the Vickynomics panel that featured lead game designer Mikael Andersson and QA lead Paul Dupré. I will compare what we know of the Vicky 3 mechanics to Vicky 2 and give you my own opinion about the different approach. Whether you agree or disagree with my opinions, I would be grateful if you made your case in the comments like I will be making my case in this very video. I have covered CK3 before its release in a similar fashion, and these videos saw great discussions in the community. Not only is meaningful feedback important to me, it is also important to the devs. I and many others lamented the absence of political parties in the early game screenshots. Game director Martin Anwar tweeted just earlier today that they will work on political party implementation after all, after seeing the feedback. So make sure to make your case for your opinion in the comments. The panel itself was extraordinarily interesting and saw a focus on the basic economic function of the game, highlighting various significant differences between the new game and its predecessor. After all, Paul Dupré actually has a degree in economic history. The economic systems as a whole, of course, are a big driving factor during this time period, and in terms of game design are the greatest unifier that connects basically all other gameplay aspects. For starters, let's explain the basic concepts. There are, for example, pops. They represent the population. There will be roughly 1 billion pops at game start, some of which will be part of the active working population, while they are also a large part of dependents. Victoria 2, for example, completely omitted dependents, so children, pensioners, and so on. The vast majority of these pops will be a part of the subsistence economy, meaning that they are active in traditional pre-industrialized circumstances, like farms, logging camps, and early manufactures. Most of the time, their work will be consumed directly by themselves, rather than resulting in an excess that could be sold on the market. Let's continue with states and provinces. There will be more than 750 states compared to Vicky 2's 549 regions, and as a new addition, states will be able to be variably split. States belong to a regional market from where the state's population will attempt to buy goods that can be used for production and consumption. At game start, there will be 140 markets, and they are how, internally, buildings that need goods to function and pops that need goods for consumption acquire their needs. Markets can also trade with other markets if the diplomatic reality allows it. There will be roughly 50 resource types as well as roughly 50 building types that can produce resources, be a part of a product supply chain, or can give other various bonuses. For example, railroads will give bonuses to a state's infrastructure. States themselves are made up of provinces and will, similar to Victoria 2, have certain resources present within them. In Victoria 2, the basic equivalent are called RGOs, so resource gathering operations. For example, a province with coal deposits will be able to produce coal, but cannot magically make oil appear unless there's a natural source. Interestingly enough, the panel also mentioned how locations that do have rare resources will attract the interest of the AI directly, as the AI will want access to such a good within its markets. This sounds promising, as it would mean that blobbing isn't just coloring the map, but instead claiming things that are truly important to your economy. As the game progresses, of course, industrialization will intensify and begin excess production, which can then deliver more resources and products to more pops. All of that is facilitated by markets. Let's talk about them. A market is an abstraction of all the trade going on within an area that allows free trade. The interesting thing here is that the panel highlighted something that Victoria 2 lacked entirely, although I want to mention that the intricacies of this mechanic are not known entirely yet, so some of this is speculation. Even within a market that has no internal trade barriers, it appears to matter that states have an infrastructure that is developed enough to allow for transfer of produced goods. What does that mean? If this is indeed how it works, it could mean that a state in the middle of nowhere in Siberia might have access to the Russian market, but has a hard time to facilitate transporting goods for import or export if they have no railroads and indeed still need to move most of their goods along rivers. This seems to be accurate, seeing as Leinster here could, if their infrastructure usage rose above 60, no longer easily transport more goods. It seems as though the effect of this would lead to a dramatic price increase just in this state. Yeah, that's right. The prices of goods are calculated for the entire market as a base price that takes into account supply, demand, and the costs in general, but are then intensified within the specific states depending on their infrastructure. It also seems likely to work the other way around. A state with horrible infrastructure would raise the price of a good that they produce on the market significantly, seeing as transporting the goods to the market itself would be horribly expensive. This means that just because you are producing or importing something in your market, the good will not necessarily be available to all pops in all states at a price that they can afford. This effectively means that in the early game, geography plays a massive role, as ports and rivers will be your main trade highways, but later on, everything depends on your ability to modernize your infrastructure. Additionally, the infrastructure itself, different from Victoria 2, also consumes goods, as of course a trade port would require a supply of wood and ships, and railroads would require locomotives to be kept operative. All of this would be totally different from Victoria 2, although I won't go into the details entirely, as that is out of the scope of this video. Just to explain it roughly, even though I don't want to go too much into the details, in Victoria 2, infrastructure cost nothing to maintain. POPs were able, no matter where they were within a market, to purchase goods of said market at the market's average price, and there was something called the world market, which was basically insane. Essentially, if your POPs could not find a good in your available market area, they would look for excess goods that were left over from other markets, and somehow, fish from China might, unbeknownst to you, teleport to France. Victoria 2's system was of course amazing at the time, but was not exactly realistic, especially if you compare it to Victoria 3. Now, let's talk about how POPs and the market are connected. All POPs have needs that are defined by the social strata they belong to, and POPs attempt to achieve some sort of income, be it from private employment, state employment, ownership of buildings, or unemployment benefits, to then spend it on fulfilling their needs. The more money is left over after purchasing all desired goods, the higher is the standard of living of any given POP. There are many effects at play here. The more expensive a good is, the more will factory owners be able to pay their workers, and the more will these workers be able to fulfill their needs. However, if a good is very expensive, it could mean that POPs elsewhere that work in industries that produce goods of little value and therefore have lower wages can no longer afford that good. Additionally, factories in the same states as the factory that produces an expensive product might see workers leave to earn more money in the other factory, cutting down the output of the lower value factory. Effectively, Victoria 3 seeks to create an impressive depiction of regional price differences, standard of living differences, and cost of living differences. Now, of course, it wouldn't be complex enough if that were all of the involved factors. A thing that also comes into play here are, of course, taxes. Victoria 2 merely had general taxes on the various strata of a country that you could set to varying levels. Victoria 3 takes it quite a bit further. It introduces different types of taxes that target different people or products. Income taxes, poll taxes, consumption taxes, and dividends taxes. This will allow you to focus your taxation in a way that makes it sustainable or, well, unsustainable if you want to transform a bunch of people into radicals and either have them emigrate or rebel. The one thing I personally find a bit odd is the fact that tariffs are not mentioned at all. Victoria 2, for example, did have tariffs, but they were basically nonsense as they taxed imports from the world market that isn't, well, really a thing at all. We are not able to issue tariffs against a particular product or particular country, for example. However, to me, a full omission of tariffs in Victoria 3 seems basically impossible, seeing how important they were in the period of mercantilism, for example. On that topic, we will simply have to wait for more infos from the devs. Of course, trade itself was discussed a bit as well. Trade now requires an active trade fleet that, similar to state infrastructure, facilitates the transport of goods. Products and resources no longer teleport across the map, but instead need you to guarantee a secure line of transport. The interesting thing about trade according to the panel is that its function has been expanded quite a bit and that it can be directed more consciously than was the case in Victoria 2. While of course trade generally makes products cheaper and more affordable, it also means that locations producing the same good but at a higher cost will eventually see their productions run dry as there is no profit to be made. This means that trade oftentimes brings benefits in general but will also have regional drawbacks. You could even use it as a weapon. The devs in particular talked about treaty ports becoming a thing to open a market and giving you access. If your treaty port has the infrastructure capacity, you could then flood the market of the other country with goods produced in your powerful factories, leading to the price plummeting, people becoming unemployed, the tax income falling dramatically, and in the end, maybe the end of the old order of the country that you just ruined for no good reason. Last but not least, the economic system was also talked about, but in such a short form that there is very little info on it. We know that the classic forms of economic organization will be there and have different impacts, and I assume that the arrows show the support of your population for each individual system. Regardless, an interesting tidbit here is that free trade will apparently no longer leave you at the mercy of AI capitalists investing wildly and without any understanding of the economy. I have to ask, why do AI capitalists in Victoria 2 love building clipper factories so much? Instead, they will pool their money in a POP investment fund that you can then distribute. All in all, seeing as in the early game the industrialization as well as the globalization of trade are not a thing, I believe that it is fair to say that the market system of Vicky 3 looks much more coherent, interesting and interactive than the system employed by Vicky 2. What is your opinion? Do you have any questions about economic concepts? Let me know about it all in the comments. I read them all. For now, I would like to thank the members of the channel, namely the Barons, Counts and Dukes. Thank you all so very much. And with that, later. Alligator.